The impermanence of mental constructs. We know how thoughts can dictate the quality of our experience. When we are in love, the world is seen as friendly, bright, and lovely. When we are heartbroken, the world is seen as dark, cold, and menacing. Most people experience their self-worth as fluctuating extremes of positive and negative. The search for more positive experiences and the avoidance of negative ones form the common day-to-day strategy of most lives. Unfortunately, if the positive view is clung to and the negative view is run from, the bondage of misidentification continues, and the experience of life remains limited. This can be hard to accept because we tend to want to cling to our beautiful states of mind, to happy sensations and wonderful moments. If they could be successfully clung to, then what would be the harm? But all beautiful states of mind are inherently impermanent, so they cannot be successfully clung to. All states of mind and all feelings arise, exist, and then disappear. Most people spend most of their day avoiding this truth through thought activity. That thought activity is primarily motivated by the desire to get back wonderful feelings from the past, and to get rid of any bad feelings that may arise in the present. When you see clearly the relentless, ruthless truth of the impermanence of bodies, emotions, thoughts, states, and images, you will have the choice to let what is impermanent be impermanent. What an easy choice. It is already impermanent. In fact, all of the activity to hold on to whatever is inherently impermanent is finally recognized as futile. In your willingness to accept the truth of impermanence, which includes every idea of who you are, there is the deepest relaxation. Your idea of who you are when you are 5 is different from your idea of who you are when you are 15, 50, or 90. An idea, by its nature, is impermanent. Recognize that any idea of who you are is impermanent. Anything that is impermanent has no inherent reality. In this complete recognition, all activity of the mind is stopped. Mind activity feeds on itself until it creates an enormous complexity of suffering. At the core of all mind activity is a search for self-definition. But the mind searches in all the wrong places. It searches in thoughts. It searches in objects, acquiring a new car, a new lover, a better job, a bigger house. It even searches in spirituality, in the quest for the enlightened me. The mind's activity is always based on rejecting something or grasping at something. Whatever the mind is rejecting or clinging to is impermanent. When your mind surrenders to the truth of impermanence, this activity has nowhere to go, and the mind is still. At this point, the mind has reached the ocean of consciousness, realizing itself as never separate from that ocean. The permanence of your true nature is recognized to be the continuous presence of awareness that was exactly the same when you were 5, 15, 50, or 90 years old. Subtle, radiant awareness is your true identity. When you realize who you are, and all your attempts to get something better so that you can be something better are seen in all their absurdity, a great deep laugh follows. Such a release, this laugh. It comes from millions of aeons of hiding from the truth of yourself, and then the exquisite release of finally surrendering to the truth of being. Memory and projection. The only obstacle to realizing the truth of who you are is thinking who you are. It is really that simple. I use all of my conversations with people to cut through that thought process, which, as you know, is very strong. The thoughts of who you are come from 2 powers of mind. the power of remembering the past, and the power of projecting into the future. Thoughts of past and future create the present thought of who you are. These powers of memory and projection are very big powers indeed. There is nothing wrong with remembering the past or projecting into the future. Both are part of the experience and the power of being human. However, the danger of this power is that in overlooking permanent presence, in being so fascinated by God's fabrications and the permutations of those fabrications, God itself is overlooked. Then suffering appears, and a yearning arises to reconnect with the truth of God to alleviate the suffering. Right now, before you hear any more, I want you to close your eyes and generate some thoughts. Everyone is a master at this, so you might as well use it. See yourself as a child. See who you were then. You may have a picture, or a sensation, or just a sense of knowing who you were then. Now see yourself as an adolescent or young adult. See who you were then. See yourself as you are when you are sick, when you feel miserable. Experience the feelings and the thoughts of being sick. Now see yourself when you are bursting with health. See who you are then. Feel the sensations that arise around the image of yourself as the healthy one. See yourself happy, really fulfilled, and imagine how that feels. Now see yourself as miserable, lost, isolated, and separate. See yourself as who you imagine you will be someday. Project yourself into the future. Now, most importantly, see if it is possible to tell the truth. What is it that sees all these images of you? What is it that is aware of all your feelings? The notions of who you are have an age. They change. They appear in the past, and they are projected into the future. What sees these changes has always been here, changelessly seeing. The seeing does not have a face, does not have a personality, and finally, does not even have an essence. It is without thought, without attribute, without past, and without future. And yet, when there are attributes, a past, a future, it is not absent. It is eternally here. If you were able in that split second to see the emptiness of any image of who you are, then you can choose to either continue chasing some better image or to surrender to the truth that is both imageless and inseparable from any image. This is very important. The formless truth of who you are is inseparable from any formulation of who you are, for the truth is all-inclusive. Right now, in this present moment, the formless truth of who you are is just as present as when your body is dead and all those images are finished. Your incredible and thrilling opportunity is to realize yourself as the formless truth before your body dies. Many of you have realized this. Many of you will realize this. Some may not realize it until they're on their deathbed. Even in that moment of death, if you can realize the formless presence that has been inseparable from every moment of your life, then your life will have been lived in the glory of that conscious awareness. Your final fulfillment will be a testimony to the world. The thoughts of yourself are the only obstacle to this fulfillment. Yet they are not a problem, because you, as consciousness, have the capacity to see through any obstacle. You are the seeing itself. You have full and absolute capacity to know yourself, to be true to yourself, and to be tested in this knowing. In that testing, you will discover and know yourself in ways that are deeper and always fresher. Comparison and possession. Another power of mine is the power to go through experience and sort it, putting it into the correct categories. What can be seen, sorted, and categorized is within the realm of the mind. Some things are ugly, some are beautiful, some are good, some are bad. But who you are is none of that. Who you are cannot be seen. It can be directly experienced, however, and it is always being experienced. Because of our infatuation with the sorting capacity of mind, we overlook this ongoing experience of what cannot be seen and what is absolutely the same in everyone, regardless of gender, race, culture, class, nervous system, intellect, or sophistication. It is closer than any concept of enlightenment or any concept of ignorance. If you will, for one moment, stop feeding the tendency of mind to compare and to polarize. What a laugh appears. What a laugh. I had hair and I was trying to be bald. I had brown eyes and I thought blue would do it. I was Western and I thought I should be Eastern. I was female and I thought I needed to be male. Those are just gross examples. It gets very, very subtle. In the mind's practice of sorting, comparing, and polarizing, there is a tragic overlooking of the sameness of oneself. The main focus of the mind's power is to possess. Learning takes place by possessing knowledge in the mind. Learning is an awesome and wondrous power, which requires the possessing function of mind. This power facilitates the great arts, the great scientific discoveries, and the capacity to design and build a house, a piece of clothing, or a meal. But where the mind cannot go, what it cannot possess, is the source of its own power. Once the attention of an individual lifetime is turned mysteriously and sacredly toward its own source, toward reunion with God, the realm of mind is of no use. Because we are so in love with the power of our minds, it may take lifetimes to discover this truth. We don't want to believe that there is somewhere our minds cannot go. We don't want to even consider that in order to realize the absolute truth of our existence, we may have to let go of everything. We cannot possess truth. That would be the mind's idea. But truth can claim its possession, which is us, each soul, each being. When I speak of stopping or calling off the search, I'm simply pointing to our habitual tendency to try to get something, which we have been trained to do with the facilities of our minds, through powers of thinking, projecting, imagining, discriminating, or veiling. But just in one instant of simply being, without being anybody, without being anything, without getting it right, without missing it, without naming it, and without knowing it, awakening is present. The truth is that everyone has these moments every day, but they are overlooked because of our infatuation with the powers of mind. The mind is not present in any of these pure and perfect moments. But then the mind arises again, and we get on with our business, with our definitions, and with our ideas of who has wronged us, what we need, or what we have to know. To realize true freedom, this infatuation with mind must be cut. And to be cut, it must first be seen. Each of us needs to investigate and then tell the truth. In telling the truth, the mind is used to expose and bust itself. In lying, the mind stays in power. When mind is busted, a deep happiness is revealed. Then the intellectual and creative capacities of every individual, the life experiences of every individual, can all be joyfully used in service to the truth. The invitation to discover love, truth, enlightenment, freedom, or yourself carries with it the ruthless fact that the mind cannot deliver it. All that is truly pure and free is unknowable. That is the humbling of the mind. That is the essential understanding that the mind can comprehend. That is the mental doorway to surrender. Because you have had success in knowing many things, you hope that if you just work hard enough, you will succeed. But the realization of true freedom is the opposite of working hard mentally. The perseverance you need here is to give up the hope that the mind can deliver freedom. Give up the hope that the mind can deliver the heart, which is love. Give up the hope that the mind can deliver enlightenment, which is truth. In that recognition, surrender can naturally follow. Strategies of the superego. The ego and its partner, the superego, are internal mental voices that appear to determine who you are, as the I am this body thought, ego, determines your individual reality. The thoughts that determine how your ego is doing, how it could be better, or why it never will be better, as well as how others are doing, are the voices of your superego. Your ego is a simulation, a virtual reality of I am, based on perception, sense experiences, and learning. Your superego is a simulation of authority designed to control your ego. It is based on feedback from others in your life. Both ego and its further development, superego, are wondrous phenomena. There's nothing inherently wrong with them. Both have an extraordinary role to play in the theater of human consciousness. The development of ego is miraculous, and the formation of superego is perhaps even more astonishing. The problem arises when they command most of your attention and life force. Your opportunity to spontaneously and authentically experience life is then preempted by attention to the internal war, the voices that state, I am this or that, versus the counterpoint, you are not enough of this or that. Some voices say you are good, beautiful, and kind, while other voices say you are horrible, ugly, and miserable. A simple example. If you bang your head accidentally, after the initial shock and sensation of pain, what mental voices do you hear? Do they deal with blame? If so, do they blame you or someone else or some object? These voices arise from your superego's attempt to assert control, usually through verbal punishment, so that headbanging won't happen again. The superego is your internalized authority, where part of your ego splits off and calls itself God, or Mother, or Father, or Guru. When you recognize this split, a great inner battle is exposed, especially in the spiritual arena, where the superego desires to get rid of the ego. Only the superego wants to get rid of the ego. Getting rid of the ego is the ultimate control. Only your superego needs war. These warring thoughts are of course reflected in our collective world as well as in our individual world. However, for our purposes here, put your attention on what is going on in your egoic reality, not because it should or shouldn't be happening, but simply to discover what is being thought of as real. We can cherish the freedoms granted by family, culture, and government, but they are ultimately meaningless if we are bound internally by a simulation of authority. Reliance on superego is buttressed by a fear of what we would be without it. In short, we generally have a deeply embedded distrust of our core self. We actually distrust the freedom we crave. The question is, can you recognize a mistake, banging your head? And can you know what is wrong, acts requiring moral choices of conscience, without a punishing or rewarding fabricated authority? Regardless of the appropriate functions of ego and superego in the past, in this moment, are you willing to trust what you have learned? And even more radically, are you willing to trust the integrity at the core? If there is an ambition to be egoless, it is a red flag. What is wrong with the ego? Who has a problem with the ego? Does awareness have a problem with the ego? only the superego has a problem with the ego, and it is a huge problem. The superego wants to control the ego. In recognizing the tendency of the superego to dominate the ego, without then having to establish a superego, you can simply welcome ego with its ambition and needs. In this moment, you can welcome them all, ego, superego, internal and external illusion, into the limitless consciousness that you truly are. Then you can experience yourself as a very limited human being with limited propensities. Another very common battering ram of the superego is the idea of worthlessness, especially in spiritual circles, where there tends to be a great fear of arrogance. But arrogance and worthlessness are just two sides of the same coin of ego. Neither experience needs to be avoided. Both can simply be met and directly investigated. If you just allow yourself to be fully and completely arrogant for 1 second, you will see the absurdity of arrogance, its posturing, its emptiness. It is exactly the same with worthlessness. If you fully and completely experience 1 second of true, absolute worthlessness, worthlessness will become nothing. It will reveal itself to be just another weapon of the superego, having nothing to do with the truth of who you are. Whether you run from arrogance, worthlessness, or any experience, you're constricting the life force. You are desperately attempting to be what you think you should be, while being haunted by what you think you are. Another interesting twist in the recognition of the superego is that if the superego is engaged in battle with the ego, it will definitely win. It is designed to win because it appears to have God on its side. It is the authority. Whatever measly little arguments the ego can throw up, the superego will win. Case closed. The impulse to listen to and be beaten by the superego is huge. But the willingness to stop and see what is under it will reveal the reality of the spaciousness beyond all faces of the superego. Then you will see that the superego is just sound and fury, signifying nothing but conditioned learning. But because this is the way that we as human animals are taught by our parents, cultures, and religions, their voices are very deeply ingrained. The core strategy of the superego is the system of rewards and punishments. It's pretty primitive, but it works. You must see how you speak to yourself internally, and how you speak to others in terms of reward or punishment. Otherwise, this thought form called superego, which says, I am the authority, I know what is right and what is wrong, continues to operate subconsciously. There is nothing wrong with rewards and punishments. They are very effective learning devices. They may be appropriate in terms of how you train children, pets, students, or co-workers. They may work in any number of arenas. But when you are dealing with the desire and longing for truth, then the strategies of reward and punishment are distractions of the mind. The mind is still assuming control as truth giver or truth judge. But truth is out of the realm of the mind. It is uncontrollably free. It cannot be punished or rewarded. As a way of investigating how the superego operates within your own mind, you can once again inquire directly within, letting the answers float freely up from the subconscious. Ask yourself these two questions. How do I punish? And how do I reward? Make no distinction between internal or external punishment or reward. When you determine that you have done something well, what praise do you give yourself? Special treats, tender words of love. And if you determine that you have done poorly, what punishment? Harsh words, anger, hate. At first your answers may seem to be obvious, things that you already know. But then perhaps you will be surprised And that is really the point of self-inquiry. To be open enough to discover what you were previously unaware of, what was unknown and unexamined. In this case, to discover how the superego manifests itself within your own mind. Whether the answers are spiritual or worldly, enlightened or mundane, is totally irrelevant. See, feel, and experience in your mind what is revealed in this inquiry. Maybe you have had many more rewarding strategies than punishing strategies. Maybe they equal each other. Maybe you are punishing yourself now for punishing yourself before. The key is the willingness to see the workings of your own mind without making them right or wrong, without adding to the power to strategize. See if there is an inner burning that can occur in the exposure of the strategies. If there is a burning, and it is not avoided but surrendered to, what does it reveal? When the mind begins to reactivate, take another moment to let all strategies go, to discover what is beneath it all, before it all, after it all, what is always here, what cannot be revoked, and what cannot be awarded. Directly experiencing the emotions. The questions I most frequently ask are related to the emotions. Many people seek to be free from difficult emotions, such as anger, fear, and grief, and seek the more pleasant emotions, such as joy, happiness, and bliss. The usual strategies for achieving happiness involve either repressing or expressing negative emotions in the hope that they will be pushed from sight or released. Unfortunately, neither way reflects the truth of one's inherent self, which is an unmoving purity of being that exists deeper than any emotion and remains unaffected by any emotion. There are certainly times when it is appropriate to repress or express an emotion. But there is also another possibility, to neither repress nor express. I call this direct experience. To directly experience any emotion is to neither deny it nor to wallow in it. And this means that there can be no story about it. There can be no storyline about who it is happening to, why it is happening, why it should not be happening, who is responsible, or who is to blame. In the midst of any emotion, so-called negative or positive, it is possible to discover what is at the core. The truth is that when you really experience any negative emotion, it disappears. And when you truly experience any positive emotion, it grows and is endless. So relatively, there are negative and positive emotions, but in inquiry, only positive ones. That is the positivity that is absolute consciousness. Because there is not much in our culture that confirms this astounding revelation, we spend our lives chasing positive emotions and running from negative emotions. When you fully experience any negative emotion with no story, it instantaneously ceases to be. If you think you are fully experiencing an emotion and it remains quite intense, then recognize that there is still some story being told about it, how big it is, how you will never be able to get rid of it, how it will always come back, how dangerous it is to experience it. Whatever the story of the moment may be, the possibilities of postponing direct experience are endless. For instance, when you are irritated, the usual tendency is to do something to get rid of the irritation, or to place blame either on yourself or someone or something else as the cause of the irritation. Then the storylines around irritation begin to develop. It is actually possible to do nothing with the irritation, to not push it out of awareness or try to get rid of it, but to directly experience it. In the moment that irritation arises, it is possible to simply be completely, totally, and freely irritated, without expressing it or repressing it. In general, direct experience often reveals a deeper emotion. Irritation is perhaps just a ripple on the surface. Deeper than irritation, there may actually be rage or fear. Again, the goal is neither to get rid of the rage or the fear, nor to analyze it, but to directly experience it. If rage or fear is revealed to be beneath irritation, then let your awareness go deeper. Let yourself be completely, absolutely angry or fearful, without acting out or repressing. Fear is often the biggest challenge, because it is what most people habitually attempt to keep away. Of course, as they try to keep it away, it grows even larger, hovers even closer. What I am suggesting is that you can actually open to fear. You can experience being afraid without any need to say you are afraid, and without following any thought of being afraid. You can just simply experience fear itself. When I speak of directly experiencing fear, I'm not speaking about physiologically appropriate fear. The response to physical danger, fight or flight, is natural and appropriate to the human organism. It is hardwired into the body for its survival. For instance, it is appropriate to get out of the way of an approaching bus. But the fears that I suggest be directly met all the way through are the psychological fears, the fears that keep our energy and attention bound unnecessarily in protection and defense, such as the fear of emotional pain, or the fear of loss or death. When a psychological fear is met, rather than resisted and run from, it often reveals an even deeper emotion. A deep sadness or hurt may be revealed under fear. This, too, can be directly and completely experienced, with no need of a storyline. If you are willing to experience these emotional layers all the way through, you will finally approach what appears to be a deep abyss. This abyss is what the mind perceives as nothingness, emptiness, nobodiness. This is an important moment, because the willingness to be absolutely nothing, to be nobody, is the willingness to be free. All of these other emotional states are layers of defense against this experience of nothingness, the death of who you think you are. Once the defenses are down, once the door is open, then this nothingness that has been feared can be met fully. This meeting is the revelation of true self-inquiry, revealing the secret gem of truth that has been hidden in the core of your own heart all along. The diamond discovered is you. This is an immense discovery, but you have to discover it for yourself. If you are willing to deeply, completely experience any emotional state, you will discover at its core the same pristine awareness, meeting itself as both the experiencer and the experienced. If you can discover this truth firsthand, you will be freed from running away from so-called negative states and running toward so-called positive ones. You will be freed from either rejecting or clinging to what is inherently impermanent. You will be freed to truly meet yourself and rejoice in this meeting. Whatever emotion arises in consciousness can be fully met by consciousness, with no need to hide in stories or analysis. In your willingness to not follow the workings of the mind, but just to be still and completely experience whatever emotion is arising, you will see that it is nothing. Emotions are only held together by thought, whether that thought is conscious or subconscious. You have the power to simply stop and say, fear, anger, grief, despair. Okay, come. When you say, okay, come, and you really mean it, and you're truly open, the emotion cannot come, because in that moment you are not telling a story about it. I invite you to check this out for yourself. Fear, anger, grief, or despair only exist when linked to a story. Yes, this is an amazing, simple, yet profound discovery. It is huge. You can actually recognize that what you are running away from does not, in truth, finally exist. And what you are running toward is already always here. When Columbus and other explorers discovered the New World, they all came back and said, "There is more out there than we know about. The earth is not flat." But many people responded, "Oh no, I'm not going there. The sea demons will get me. I will fall off the earth." It is with this same primitivism that we view our emotions. If you are willing to fall off the edge of the earth, you will see that you yourself hold the earth, and you cannot fall off from yourself. You can only go deeper into yourself. On the opposite end of the spectrum, in the Western spiritual subculture in particular, people are fairly open to experiencing their emotions because it gives them a sense of depth and a sense of freedom. But this can become a cover for the fear of experiencing no emotion whatsoever. Defining yourself as an emotional being is perhaps a step deeper than defining yourself as a purely mental being, but it is not all the way home. What you avoid in defining yourself as an emotional being is emotionlessness, nothingness, emptiness. Once you have experienced pure emptiness, you know directly that who you are cannot be defined by any mental or emotional state, and this knowledge is freedom. When you do not define yourself by emotional states, then the emotions are free to arise because they don't mean anything about who you are. You know directly that all states are simply passing through the pure space that is your true nature. I invite you all the way in to the heart of pure being, not to get rid of any emotion, not to dramatize or glorify any emotion, but to discover what every emotion is calling for, to die to whom you think you are before who you think you are dies.